The rickety screen door of Doris's diner slammed open with a jingle that cut through the country music softly playing inside. Plates clinked behind the counter. A faint smell of bacon grease hung in the air, mingling with the aroma of fresh coffee. Most afternoons, this roadside pit stop was about as quiet as a small-town library. Patrons reading the local paper or picking at slices of pie, murmuring about the weather or last Friday's football game. But the moment those doors flew open, I felt the entire diner hold its breath. He came in like he owned the place, boots stomping, leather vest with faded patches, a scowl etched as deep as old canyon walls. His voice boomed loud enough to rattle the napkin dispensers. You didn't need to see the back of his vest to know he rode with a group that thrived on intimidation. A hush fell over the diner, folks ducking their heads to avoid making eye contact. You'd have thought a mountain lion had strolled in. I was in the corner booth, a regular traveler who'd learned to appreciate Doris's home cooking. A friend had once told me, if you're passing through the outskirts of Amarillo, you gotta stop at Doris's. Best pies in Texas. He wasn't wrong. The pie was divine. But that afternoon, the baked goods were the last thing on my mind. My gaze drifted from my half-eaten burger to the huge biker striding toward the counter. At that moment, Dolly, a middle-aged waitress with a kind smile and a voice like honey, stepped into his path. She'd been working double shifts for weeks, trying to save up for her granddaughter's birthday. She always had a moment to chit-chat, always had a kind word to share. That day, she offered him a warm greeting. "Welcome to Doris's, sir. Grab a seat wherever you like." He didn't like it, apparently. He thrust out a greasy finger, pointing to a booth. "Give me a coffee and don't skimp on the sugar," he barked, throwing an empty sugar packet on the floor. Dolly blinked, her polite facade crackling but not yet broken. She was used to difficult customers, though usually not the physically imposing kind. Still, she maintained her composure. "Of course. Coffee, cream, sugar. Anything else I can get you?" The biker slid into the booth and raised an eyebrow, his face twisting in a mockery of Dolly's courtesy. "Maybe you can fetch me some real service instead of that donkey Swillier type usually serves." There was a moment when every set of eyes in the diner landed on Dolly, concerned about how she might react. Her bottom lip trembled just a bit. I saw her steel herself. Dolly was no stranger to rude customers, but something about this man felt different, like he enjoyed making people flinch. She pressed her lips together, turned, and busied herself behind the counter, preparing his order. Across the diner, by the window, sat a man with a shaved head, quietly reading the local paper. I'd noticed him a few minutes earlier. He wore a gray t-shirt that clung to his athletic frame and well-worn jeans. The newspaper he held seemed tiny in his broad hands. He was a new face to me, but he had an aura of confidence about him, like he was comfortable anywhere he went, but especially in places where trouble might brew. At that moment, our eyes met briefly. He gave me a polite nod and turned the page. Back then, I had no idea I was looking into the face of Jason Statham. I just thought he was another traveler, killing time with a cup of black coffee. Dolly tried to maintain her cheery voice. She brought the biker his coffee with extra sugar. He took one sip, spit it back into the cup, and shoved it away. "Who taught you to brew coffee, your granny? It's lukewarm slop, lady." Then he laughed a loud, hollow sound. Heads turned away, either in fear or embarrassment. Dolly gently picked up the sullied cup and made a move to fetch another. But the biker decided he wasn't done. "You've been working here long?" "Must have. Only a washed-up old maid would waste her life in a dump like this." That did it. Dolly's friendly facade wavered, replaced by shock and quiet indignation. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a choked stutter. The biker roared with laughter, leaning over the table so that his broad shoulders practically filled the booth. Other diners looked away, whispering among themselves. Nobody seemed brave enough to do anything, except the man by the window. Jason Statham folded his newspaper with a distinct crispness. He placed it on the table and got to his feet. He stood maybe 5'9", 5'10", not especially tall, but something about the way he moved made me think of a wolf quietly stalking across a field. He glanced around, as if mentally taking stock of the situation. By then, Dolly was backing up behind the counter, blinking away tears. She was too proud to break down in front of everyone, but the humiliation burned clear on her face. And that was when the shaved-head man spoke, his voice low, calm, but firm. "That's quite enough." The biker, mid-sip, froze. Slowly, he placed his cup down and turned to face the voice. His lips curled. He measured Jason with the cold confidence of a man who had no fear of a fight. But Jason held the biker's gaze without blinking. The tension wound through the room like a coiled spring. A single cough could have started an avalanche of chaos. Someone in the back coughed anyway. It wasn't an avalanche yet, but it was enough to break the hush. The biker sized Jason up and let a mocking grin spread across his face. "Or what?" he sneered. And just like that, the fuse was lit. If you'd looked around the diner at that moment, you'd have seen half the patrons ready to slide under their tables. A confrontation between a big, surly biker and an unknown, yet unflinching stranger was the kind of spectacle folks preferred to watch from a distance. Jason didn't rush to respond. He let the biker's challenge hang in the air. Then, with deliberate calm, he spoke again, apologized to the lady. For a second, the biker seemed caught off guard, as if he'd expected threats or curses, not a polite demand. But he wasn't about to back down. Instead, he aimed a finger at Dolly, who stood behind the counter with trembling hands. "I don't apologize to cheap servers who can't do their jobs," he growled. Jason's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something beneath the surface. Anger, maybe, or simply resolute determination. He walked across the diner, stepping carefully between the scattered chairs, never taking his eyes off the man. The biker rose, too, the legs of his booth squealing in protest against the floor. Everyone held their breath. It seemed like we might have a full-blown standoff right there by the condiment station. The two men squared off, the biker towering a few inches taller, though Jason looked every bit as solid. If you'd asked me to place a bet, I wouldn't have known where to put my money. There was something in Jason's stance, a quiet confidence you couldn't buy with mere muscle. The biker's lips twitched into a snarl, like a dog protecting its turf. "You got a death wish, friend?" Jason responded in a steady tone, just a sense of decency. Before the biker could retort, a new voice cut in. "Everything all right here?" Doris herself had emerged from the kitchen, hands on her wide hips. She was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back into a neat bun, lines of worry now carving across her kindly face. She glanced at Dolly, then at the two men. "I'm not looking for trouble in my diner," she added sternly, though her voice had the edge of a plea. The biker didn't even glance her way. "Well, trouble found you," he spat, his eyes locked on Jason, who stood calmly, fists relaxed at his sides. "I suggest you get your boy here on a leash before he gets hurt." Jason flicked his gaze to Doris, gave her a tiny nod that said, "I got this." Then he took a step closer to the biker. "Let the waitress be," he said, quietly and firmly. "That's all I'm asking." In the hush that followed, the biker's smirk turned vicious. "It's not all you're going to get," he muttered. Then, in a move that happened faster than I could blink, he swung a calloused fist toward Jason's ribs. If it had landed, it might have broken bones. But Jason sidestepped, hooking his arm under the biker's forearm to deflect the blow. The biker staggered, thrown off balance. A gasp rippled through the diner. Chairs screeched as a few customers scrambled to get out of the way. For a heartbeat, I thought that might be the end of it. But the biker came back swinging. He lashed out again, a hard right jab that whistled through the air. This time, Jason pivoted, catching the man's wrist and twisting just enough to direct the punch into an empty booth. The biker's fist collided with the padded seat instead of Jason's face. His roar of frustration echoed against the diner's walls. Doris let out a scream for them to stop. Dolly gasped, her eyes darting from the kitchen door. I heard someone mutter, "Call the cops," but nobody moved. It was as if we were all frozen in place, witnessing a storm. The biker reeled, his face flushing red. He shook out his fist as though it stung from hitting the booth. Jason raised a hand in a calming gesture, as if offering the man an out. "Walk away," he said, voice low. "This doesn't have to go further. Only place I'm walking away to is over your limp body." The biker snarled. He rolled his neck, knuckles cracking, and sprang forward again, telegraphing his next move so clearly that Jason easily ducked. Now, I'm no martial arts expert, but I can recognize skill when I see it. Jason didn't waste movement. He used the biker's momentum against him, catching him across the shoulder and guiding him down in a fluid motion that ended with the biker's chest slamming onto a table. Dishes rattled, a glass of iced tea toppled over, and a collective gasp rose from every onlooker. Panting and furious, the biker tried to wrench free. Jason leaned in, pressing the man's arm behind him just enough to enforce compliance. The biker growled, but you could see the surprise etched on his face. Clearly, he hadn't expected such efficient resistance. "Apologize," Jason repeated, his voice calm, yet edged with steel. A hush fell again, broken only by the harsh breathing of the pinned man. For a moment, he glared at Dolly, at Jason, at all of us. Then, with a sneer, he let out a breathless string of curses. One by one, the words dried up, leaving behind seething silence. Jason maintained his hold. Finally, the biker spat out, "Fine. I apologize. Happy now?" Reluctantly, Jason eased up. The biker jerked his arm free and stood, face mottled, chest heaving. He fixed Dolly with a hateful stare, then stomped across the diner, his heavy boots echoing on the linoleum. For a second, I wondered if he'd turn back and try something else. But instead, he flung the door wide and disappeared into the daylight. A collective sigh of relief washed through the diner, though tension still cracked in the air like a static charge. Dolly leaned against the counter, her eyes watering from the release of pent-up fear. Doris hurried to her side, wrapping her arms around her, and Jason, seemingly unruffled, nodded to Doris. "Sorry about the trouble, ma'am. Might be best to check on her. She's shaken." Doris swallowed, nodded, and guided Dolly to a seat behind the counter, pressing a glass of water into her trembling hands. The rest of the diner stared at Jason. He merely walked back to his table, picked up his half-finished cup of coffee, and took a sip. If he was rattled by the confrontation, he didn't show it. Instead, he caught my gaze, offered a brief smile, then reopened the local paper as if nothing particularly unusual had occurred. Yet something had changed in the atmosphere of Doris's diner. We all knew that man wouldn't be the last trouble. Word spread quickly. By evening, half the folks in town were talking about how a bald stranger had taken down a rowdy biker at Doris's. Some said he was a trained fighter, maybe ex-military. Others whispered about him being some Hollywood actor passing through on his way to who knows where. The story took on a life of its own, each retelling adding a little more color. By the time the sun dipped behind the wide Texas plains, folks were spinning wild tales of him disarming 3 bikers with just a spoon. But for those of us who'd actually witnessed it, the truth was enough. Jason, though I didn't yet know his last name, had quietly and calmly stood up for Dolly when no one else dared. Most of the diner's patrons filtered out in the hours that followed, but I stayed until closing. Part curiosity, part gratitude, and part worry. Dolly was a friend, and I wanted to make sure she'd be all right. I also wanted to talk to this mysterious man. Jason lingered at his booth, occasionally tapping the screen of his phone or gazing out the diner window at the orange glow of the sunset. He didn't seem in a hurry, even though most travelers would have been back on the highway by then. Finally, when the last slice of pie was cleared from the display case, he stood and made his way to the register. I intercepted him near the counter. "Thanks for stepping in earlier," I said, offering my hand. Could have gotten real ugly. He gave a modest shrug. Could have gone better, too. I prefer no one gets hurt, especially not a lady just doing her job. Up close, the lines on his face seemed chiseled with quiet resolve. He wasn't grandstanding or replaying what happened like some folks might. It struck me that he'd only intervened for Dolly. Nothing more, nothing less. Purely out of decency, just like he'd said. "You from around here?" I asked. The question was half curiosity, half attempt to confirm the rumors swirling through my head. "Just passing through," he replied. His accent had a faint British edge that told me the wild stories about him being some sort of action movie star might be more plausible than I'd initially believed. Still, I didn't want to pry too much. "Name's Jason. I'm Mart," I said, giving him my name in return. And I appreciate what you did. Before I could ask more, Doris called Jason over to thank him personally. Dolly, still shaken, mustered a watery smile. I'm sorry you had to do that, she whispered. I'm, not really good at dealing with bullies. He shook his head. That's understandable. It's not your job to fight bullies. You serve coffee and smiles. Sometimes the world needs decent folks like you. I was just in the right place at the right time. Dolly's lips trembled, but she managed to nod, clearly grateful. Then her face tightened. I'm just worried. That man, he's part of a bigger crowd, you know? That patch on his vest, that's the Iron Serpents. They're meaner than rattlesnakes. If he decides to come back, Jason met her gaze. Then I'm sure we'll manage. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Dolly offered a faint smile. I hope so, too. That night, the diner closed without further incident. Jason walked out into the parking lot, pausing at a sleek black SUV. I watched him from the doorway. He appeared calm, as though the dust-up that afternoon was already behind him. Something about that cool composure reassured me, and yet a tiny voice in the back of my mind warned that the trouble might only be on pause. My intuition proved right the next afternoon, when a trio of bikers roared into Doris's parking lot. The shriek of their engines sent chills down my spine. Inside, Dolly was in the middle of her shift, carefully balancing a tray of plates. Her eyes darted to the window. Doris glanced up from the cash register, her expression turning stony as she recognized those patches on the bikers' vests. I happened to be there again. Couldn't resist Doris's pot roast or the chance to see if things had settled. Jason wasn't in sight, at least not yet. A hush fell over the diner as the three men marched in. The first was tall and lean, sporting a twisted grin. The second was burly with tattoos swirling over both arms, his face a stoic mask. The third, older, mustached, carried himself like he owned the place. He was the one who approached the counter. He glanced around, taking in the wary stares, then locked eyes with Dolly. We're looking for a friend, he said in a falsely gentle tone. Big fella, shaved head, likes to play tough guy. Heard he had a disagreement here yesterday. Dolly swallowed, her grip on the tray tightening. Doris, stepping forward, fixed them with a no-nonsense glare. He's not here, she said curtly. And if he was, you can bet we wouldn't let you give him trouble. The tall, lean biker snorted. Cute. Maybe you old ladies need a reminder that the Iron Serpents don't take kindly to folks roughing up one of ours. A flicker of fear danced in Dolly's eyes, but she kept her chin up. He started it, she said quietly. He was bullying me. Jason just helped. Tattoos crossed his arms. Jason, huh? So that's his name. You know where we can find him? No one said anything. The older man with the mustache leaned over, pressing both palms on the counter. I'm going to ask nicely once. Where is he? Silence. Doris's jaw set like concrete. Dolly's lips tightened. My heart hammered. I wasn't sure what to do. Call the police? Speak up? This had the makings of an ugly situation. But then, as if on cue, the jingle of the door announced a newcomer. In walked Jason, wearing the same gray t-shirt and jeans, carrying a small bag from the convenience store across the street. He paused in the doorway, surveying the new arrivals. No shock registered on his face. He must have expected something like this would happen. You looking for me? Jason asked quietly, setting down the plastic bag near the coat rack. His gaze swept over the three men, calmly assessing them. The mustached biker smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Ah, there you are. You mind stepping outside for a chat? Jason considered for half a beat. Then he answered, we can talk here. No need to make a scene. The biker glanced around at the customers, who were watching with barely disguised horror. Perhaps he didn't want the entire diner as witness to what he intended. I insist. Without waiting, he led his men back through the door, out into the parking lot. Jason followed, hands relaxed at his sides. Every instinct screamed at me to stay out of it, but my feet had other ideas. Dolly's eyes locked on mine, silently begging me not to let Jason walk out alone. So I gulped down my fear and pushed open the door, stepping outside into the bright afternoon sun. I was half expecting fists to start flying the second we exited, but the bikers seemed to be biding their time. Maybe they wanted to see if Jason would apologize or show fear. The mustached man clasped his hands in front of him and spoke in a deceptively calm voice. "My nephew came in here yesterday. Says you blindsided him." Slammed him against a table. Jason cocked his head. He neglected to mention he was bullying a waitress? A flicker in the man's eyes betrayed that he might know his nephew's habits. But loyalty ran deeper than fairness. "Doesn't matter. We look after our own." Jason's stance remained unwavering. "So do I." The parking lot of Doris's diner was hot enough to fry an egg on that afternoon, the pavement shimmering with heat. A light breeze carried the tang of dust and motor oil. Around us, the three bikers formed a loose semicircle, their postures tense with threat. Jason stood calmly across from them, shoulders relaxed, yet every line of his body ready for sudden movement. I hung back near the diner door, torn between wanting to help and knowing I was out of my depth. Doris and Dolly watched from inside, peering through the plate glass window with mounting anxiety. A few other customers hovered by their cars, ready to bolt or call the cops. Tension clung to the air like humidity before a thunderstorm. The mustached biker, who seemed to be the leader, shoved his hands into his pockets. "You're not from around here. That means you can leave as quick as you came in. And if you go now, quietly, maybe we won't have to teach you a lesson." Jason eyed him, lips pressed in a thin line. "If you're planning to teach me a lesson for protecting a woman from your nephew's abuse, I'm not interested in attending your class." The tall, lean biker spat on the ground. "He's got a mouth on him, too." At that, Jason took a slow step forward, more an act of emphasis than aggression. "Listen, I don't want to fight, but I won't stand by if you harass these folks. Dolly's just trying to make a living. Doris's diner has nothing to do with your nephew's choices." The older biker's jaw flexed. He flicked his gaze toward the diner window. "Doris, Dolly, whatever their names are, serve coffee and keep out of business that ain't theirs. That's how it works. Next time, maybe they remember that." Jason's eyes narrowed. I saw a muscle twitch in his cheek. He wasn't just defending Dolly now. He was challenging a whole culture of bullying that stretched beyond a single incident. It was a big fight to take on alone, but something told me Jason didn't see it that way. He simply wasn't the type to stand down from what he believed was right. With a sigh, the mustached biker pulled his hands free. "I gave you a choice. Walk away, or you won't walk at all." A tense beat passed. Jason said nothing, but his expression spoke volumes. I half expected him to raise his fists or launch into some martial arts dance. Instead, he just stood there, unyielding, a pillar in the middle of that dusty lot. That was apparently all the answer they needed. The big, burly biker with tattoos rushed forward, swinging a meaty fist aimed at Jason's jaw. Jason twisted aside, letting the blow whistle past, then brought his arm up in a quick block. The resulting smack echoed, and the burly man staggered. A flurry of moves followed. Jason's elbow darted out, catching the biker's side, followed by a deft push that sent him reeling. But the other two were closing in. The tall one tried to tackle Jason around the waist, while the mustached leader circled to flank him. Jason shoved the tall biker away, but the mustached one lunged, connecting a glancing blow to Jason's shoulder. Jason grunted, absorbing the hit, and spun, delivering a precise kick that forced the mustached biker to stumble back. I stood there, heart pounding like a jackhammer, as the swirl of fists, elbows, and grunts filled the air. Jason seemed a blur of disciplined efficiency, never wasting energy. The three bikers, fueled by rage and bravado, attacked like a pack of wolves. But time and time again, Jason maneuvered out of harm's way, deflecting strikes and countering with well-placed hits. Just when it seemed the bikers might coordinate a more effective strategy, a different noise cut through the chaos. Sirens. Someone had mustered the sense to call the police. The wail grew louder as two squad cars hurtled down the road toward the diner, lights flashing. The sight made the bikers hesitate, if only for a split second. It was enough. Jason saw his chance, hooking the taller biker's arm and flipping him with surprising force. The man landed on his back, winded. The mustached leader cursed, jerked his head toward the roaring squad cars, and barked, "We're done here." All three men scrambled for their bikes. engines roaring to life. They peeled out of the parking lot in a haze of smoke, leaving behind the acrid stench of burnt rubber. Jason stood alone, chest heaving from exertion, dust in the air settling around him. Seconds later, the cops arrived. I recognized the older officer, Deputy Harrelson, stepping out of the first cruiser. He surveyed the scene. Jason breathing hard, me gawking near the door, a couple of shaken customers watching from their cars. "Someone want to tell me what happened?" he called out, eyebrows raised. Jason, wiping sweat from his brow, spoke calmly. "Some bikers had an issue with me. They left." Harrelson cast a suspicious eye, but when he glanced at Doris's diner's window, he saw Dolly nod in confirmation. Another officer circled around, as if expecting to see bodies on the asphalt. There were none. Jason had dispatched the 3 bikers without leaving them sprawled unconscious, which, in some odd way, spoke to his restraint. Eventually, Dolly and Doris came outside, voices trembling as they recounted the events to the deputies. I offer my own account as well. The story was consistent. The Iron Serpents came looking for revenge, tried to assault Jason, and fled when the law showed up. Jason said little, but his presence was enough to confirm the tale. Harrelson let out a long breath. "We've been dealing with the Iron Serpents for a while now. They're not the biggest gang in Texas, but they cause more than their fair share of trouble. Looks like they've picked you as their new enemy, mister." He glanced at Jason, wary. "You might want to pack up and head on out of town." Jason nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement of the man's point of view. "I'm aware," he said quietly, "but I'm not running." Harrelson chewed on that for a moment. "Well, if you see him again, let us know." He gave Jason a careful once-over. "You got some skills. Military training?" Jason offered a ghost of a smile. "Something like that." He left it at that, which only fueled the silent speculation. The officers took statements, scribbled notes, and eventually left, presumably to scout the main roads for the Iron Serpents. That left the rest of us standing in the midday sun. Doris cleared her throat. "All right, folks, show's over. Jason, come in and get a cold drink. You too, Art. Don't need you fainting from the heat." She bustled us inside, switching on the ceiling fans to chase away the oppressive warmth. Dolly handed Jason a damp cloth, which he pressed to a small cut on his forearm. Despite the frantic whirlwind that had just unfolded, Jason appeared oddly composed. It was Dolly whose hands shook as she poured him a glass of water. She set the pitcher down a bit too forcefully, water sloshing. "I'm sorry," she murmured. I never wanted you to be in danger over me." Jason met her gaze, kindness in his eyes. "Don't apologize. Bullies escalate, and they don't always need a reason. All I did was refuse to let them run roughshod over you. But they'll be back," Dolly whispered, voice strained. "They're not just going to forget." Jason took a sip of water. He was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Dolly and Doris. "If they come back, we'll handle it. Together. I won't let them hurt you or anyone here." I could see the conflict in Dolly's eyes, torn between gratitude and fear. Doris stepped behind the counter and placed a comforting hand on Dolly's shoulder. They were good people, running a simple diner, never expecting to be in the crosshairs of a biker gang. I exhaled, slumping into a booth. Part of me thought Jason might be wise to pack his bag and hit the road. Leave the Iron Serpents behind, let the police handle the fallout. But another part of me knew Dolly was right. These men wouldn't forget. The next time, they might not confront Jason in broad daylight. They might do something far worse when no one was looking. Jason swirled the water in his glass, as if weighing options. Finally, he placed it down. "Don't worry," he said quietly, his voice an anchor in the storm. "I've dealt with bullies before. They usually keep coming until you show them there's a line they can't cross. Let's hope they see that line and stay on their side. If not," he let the sentence hang. That evening, the diner tried to return to normal, but the atmosphere was charged. We all pretended we were just regular folks enjoying the daily special. But deep down, we braced ourselves for the Iron Serpent's next move. The days that followed felt like sitting on a powder keg. Each time the doors to Doris's diner chimed, we'd all look up, half expecting another angry biker to come barreling in. But the Iron Serpents didn't show. At least not in any obvious way. Maybe they were lying low after tangling with Jason and drawing police attention. Jason stuck around town longer than he'd planned. He rented a modest room above the hardware store, paying by the week. He never said exactly why he lingered, but I suspected he stayed for Dolly's sake. Despite her brave face, Dolly was jumpy, hearing every motorcycle engine in the distance as if it heralded doom. Doris tried to reassure her, but the tension was clear. On a Wednesday afternoon, Jason dropped by the diner when business was slow. He sipped coffee at the counter, chatting quietly with Dolly about everyday things. Her granddaughter's birthday, the new pancake recipe Doris was testing. He had a knack for easing the tension, asking about Dolly's life like he genuinely cared. She seemed calmer with him around, as if the presence of this reserved, unassuming man somehow kept the shadows at bay. I was in a booth, catching up on local gossip with a friend. Now and then, I threw a glance Jason's way, still trying to piece him together. He never bragged about the altercation. He didn't strut around, flaunting his abilities. If anything, he acted like the scuffle was an unfortunate necessity. Rumors still swirled. Some folks claimed he was ex-SAS. Others swore he was Jason Statham, the actor from the movies. Most just nodded in respectful appreciation of how he'd stood up to the Iron Serpents. It was near closing time when we finally found out just how far those bikers were willing to go. The door jangled, and we all tensed out of habit. But it wasn't a biker. It was the local postman, white-faced and breathless, clutching a slip of paper. "Doris, Dolly, you need to see this," he stammered. He handed over a small, folded note, which had been taped to the diner's mailbox out front. Dolly read it first, her face going pale. Doris read over her shoulder, then set her jaw in anger. She passed the note to Jason. I stood, heart in my throat, to read it as well. "We haven't forgotten." Jason steps out of line again. "We burn this place to the ground, with you in it." The Iron Serpents. It felt like a punch to the gut. Dolly's hand shook. Doris pursed her lips. Jason read it twice, then placed it on the counter. A quiet storm brewed in his eyes. "They're making threats now," he said, his voice cold as stone. Doris looked at Jason. "I'll call the police," she said, though she sounded deflated, like she knew this note wouldn't guarantee immediate protection. The Iron Serpents had plenty of hideouts and ways to avoid the law. "We can't live under these threats," Doris added, tears trembling in her eyes. "I built this diner with my late husband. Dolly's worked here half her life. We can't just walk away because some thugs don't like that you stood up to them." Jason set a comforting hand on Doris's shoulder. "You're not walking away. Neither am I." I'll never forget the resolve in his face. That moment, I realized he was doing more than defending a waitress. He was defending the dignity of people who'd built honest lives. These folks had no reason to be forced out by fear. And if the Iron Serpents wanted a fight, Jason was ready to meet them head-on. The police arrived again, taking the note as evidence. Deputy Harrelson said the same thing. "We're investigating, but the Iron Serpents slip through our fingers. Let us know if you see them." It was as reassuring as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. A night of uneasy sleep passed. I woke the next morning to find a text from Dolly. "Please come to the diner. Jason's here. We need to talk." My stomach nodded. I hurried over, stepping into the diner's hush. Doris had locked the front door briefly to keep out random customers so we could meet in private. Dolly looked tired, eyes puffy from crying. Jason stood by the jukebox, arms folded, as if waiting for me. He cut straight to the chase. "They're planning something, Art. We can't just sit here and wait. Harrelson's doing what he can, but that's not enough. They might strike when the diner's full of innocent folks. We can't have that. You have a plan?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. Jason exhaled. "I talked to a friend of mine in law enforcement, unofficially. He advised me to keep them on the defensive, not let them terrorize us. So I'm going to confront them on their own turf." Dolly covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. Doris shook her head in alarm. "That's suicide," she whispered. "They're a gang of violent men." A flicker of a smile tugged at the corner of Jason's mouth. "I've handled worse. Trust me." Then, more solemnly, "But I won't force anyone else to come. I just need an address or a lead on where they gather. The Iron Serpents must have a favorite bar or clubhouse near the highways. Dolly swallowed. There's a rundown roadhouse called the Snake Pit, about 10 miles out. Folks in town say that's where the Iron Serpents like to congregate. Jason gave a grim nod. Then that's where I'll go. Let me come, I heard myself say, surprising even me. My voice was shaky, but I meant it. I'm not much of a fighter, but you shouldn't walk into that place alone. If things go south, maybe I can, I don't know, call for help. Dolly grabbed my arm, pleading, no, Art, you can't. You'll get yourself killed. I took a deep breath, meeting Jason's gaze. I owe it to Dolly, and to this diner. You said it yourself. We need to show them they can't bully us. Jason studied me, then dipped his head in a quiet thanks. Doris looked like she wanted to protest, but she saw the determination in our eyes. With a trembling voice, she said, please be safe, both of you. And so was decided. That evening, we left the comfort of Doris's neon sign behind and headed for a battered roadhouse off the old highway, with a neon serpent glowed sickly green in the night. I gripped the steering wheel of my old pickup, Jason riding shotgun, quiet and focused. The sky was dark, dotted with distant stars that offered no comfort. We pulled up to the Snake Pit. Rows of motorcycles lined the gravel lot, their chrome glinting under harsh lights. Already, my nerves hummed with adrenaline. My brain screamed that this was madness. But Jason's calm presence kept me from turning tail. He glanced at me once. Stay behind me. Let me do the talking. The low throb of music seeped through the roadhouse doors. We stepped inside, greeted by the stench of stale beer and cigarette smoke. The place was dim, a few overhead bulbs illuminating scuffed floors and chipped bar stools. Groups of leather-clad men lounged around, their stares turning predatory as we entered. I spotted the mustached leader from before, leaning against the bar. He froze mid-swallow, eyes narrowing. Jason strode to the center of the room, posture firm. A hush descended. In a voice that carried quietly yet powerfully, he said, I'm looking for the Iron Serpents who threatened to burn down Doris's diner. You could have heard a pin drop. Then the mustache man slowly set his beer down, wiping foam off his lips. That'd be me, he said. Name's Rourke. He flicked a glance over Jason, then me. Well, you got what's coming here, friend. Jason's hands didn't clench into fists. He simply stood there, unblinking. It stops here. The threats, the harassment. Leave the diner and everyone there alone. You've been warned. Rourke's lips curled into a cruel grin. You're outnumbered 10-1. And I warned you. We protect our own. He took a step forward. That means you're done. Jason didn't let him finish. He moved quicker than I'd ever seen, stepping inside Rourke's guard, grabbing his collar, and driving him back against the bar. Glasses toppled. Men lurched to their feet, chairs scraping. I'm not talking, Jason said quietly. I'm telling you, end it. Now. For a heartbeat, Rourke's bravado faltered. Then chaos erupted. The end.